earliest Christians viewed it as an important and even inspired text. But over time, as the church grew and became more organized, leaders began to decide which books should be included in the official Bible. This was not just about spiritual truth, it was also about unity. The church wanted to create one clear message that all Christians could follow. This process came to a turning point in the 4th and 5th centuries. Church councils were held to finalize the biblical canon. The Council of Laodicea, around 363 AD, was one of the first to list which books were approved for public reading. Later, the councils of Hippo in 393 AD and Carthage in 397 AD confirmed similar lists. In all of these councils, the Book of Enoch was not included. After this, the book began to disappear from mainstream Christianity. It was no longer read in churches. It was not copied by scribes. Eventually, in Europe and the Middle East, it faded into obscurity. For over 1,000 years, it was almost completely forgotten, mentioned only in passing by scholars and theologians who no longer had access to the full text. But for most of the world, its absence for so long only reinforced the idea that it was never truly meant to be part of the Bible. So why was it forbidden? Some explanations are based on historical and theological concerns. One reason is that the Book of Enoch is what scholars call a pseudepigraphal text. That means it was written under the name of someone famous, in this case, Enoch, but not actually written by him. This was a common practice in the ancient world, but for later church authorities, it raised questions about authenticity. If Enoch didn't really write it, could it still be trusted? Another reason is the book's content. 1 Enoch is filled with visions, angels, and apocalyptic warnings. It describes the fall of heavenly beings, the corruption of humanity, and the coming of a final judgment. These themes were very different from the more structured theology that was forming in the early church. Some leaders may have seen the book as too mystical or too speculative. It didn't fit the new, clearer message of salvation and doctrine they were trying to build. Angels who descended to earth, took human wives, and created a race of giants called the Nephilim. This idea comes from a mysterious few verses in Genesis, but Enoch expands on it in great detail. In the early church, many thinkers like Justin Martyr and Irenaeus accepted this story and used it to explain the origin of evil. But over time, this view changed. By the 5th century, powerful theologians like Augustine of Hippo began to argue that angels could not have physical bodies and therefore could not have children with humans. He proposed a different interpretation, that the sons of God in Genesis were actually humans from the righteous line of Seth. This new reading became the dominant view in Christianity. As a result, the story told in Enoch was now seen as incorrect or even dangerous. Beyond these theological reasons, there is another idea. The Book of Enoch challenges the very structure of religious authority. In its pages, Enoch is not a priest, not a prophet from Israel, and not someone who follows temple rituals. He is an outsider and an antediluvian man who walks with God, receives visions, and is taken into heaven without dying. He speaks with angels, sees the secrets of the universe, and returns to warn humanity. In later traditions, he even becomes the angel Metatron, second only to God. For some, this was too much. If Enoch could access divine knowledge without being part of any institution, what did that mean for priests, temples, or church councils? The book offered a direct connection between heaven and earth, one that bypassed organized religion entirely. There's also a theory that the Book of Enoch wasn't removed because it was false, but because it was too close to something true. The book describes a version of human history that is older, darker, and more mysterious than the one we're taught. It tells of ancient beings who gave humanity forbidden knowledge. It speaks of cosmic prisons and judgment not just for humans, but for angels. It suggests that evil began in the heavens and fell to the earth. For some, this explanation makes uncomfortable sense. It fills in gaps left open by the Bible. It answers questions that are still debated today. If the Book of Enoch had been accepted into the Bible, it would have changed the way we see everything, from creation to salvation to the battle between good and evil. Perhaps that's why it was excluded. Even today, the Book of Enoch remains one of the most mysterious texts ever written. Dismissed, forgotten, and rediscovered, it speaks of a world far older and stranger than we are taught to imagine. To some, it is a myth. To others, it is a blueprint for the future. Whatever it may be, most historians agree that the Book of Enoch is a key to understanding the origins of religion, and a truth that was never lost, only hidden. If this truth resonates with you and sparks questions or theories of your own, share them in the comments. And if you believe more people should discover the secrets of the Book of Enoch, like the video and help spread the word. To go even deeper and experience the complete story, watch the full Book of Enoch movie next. Keep your minds open, and until we meet again. We've all heard the familiar stories from the Bible, the life, teachings, and miracles of Jesus. But what if I told you there are other accounts? Stories that show us an entirely different picture of Jesus, his disciples, and his message. These are the forbidden Gospels, texts that were excluded from the Bible, deemed too controversial, mystical, or unconventional. Have you ever asked yourself the question, why are they excluded? What was so wrong about them that they decided to leave them out of the most popular book ever written? Today, we're uncovering the top 10 forbidden Gospels that were banned from the Bible. But make sure to stick around until the end, because each revelation builds on the last, leading up to number 10, the most shocking and thought-provoking Gospel of them all. The first one is the Gospel of the Hebrews. This Jewish Christian text provides unique insights into Jesus' teachings and his relationship with his family. In one account, Jesus appears to his brother James after the resurrection saying, "Take hold of me, I am not a disembodied spirit." This text bridges the gap between Jewish and Christian traditions, highlighting the human and divine aspects of Jesus. And when the Lord had given the linen cloth to the servant of the priest, he went to James and appeared to him. For James had sworn that he would not eat bread from that hour in which he drank the Lord's cup, until he should see him risen from among those who sleep. This passage highlights Jesus' appearance to James, his brother, after the resurrection. It reflects the strong bond between them and emphasizes James's devotion to Jesus, a relationship that isn't as prominently featured in the canonical Gospels. This Gospel is mentioned by early church fathers like Clement of Alexandria and Jerome, who believed it was written in Hebrew or Aramaic, though the original text has been lost. Some scholars think it was closely related to the Gospel of Matthew, but tailored for a Jewish audience. Let's go back in time, before Jesus' birth, to explore the life of his mother, Mary. The Proto-Evangelium of James, written in the 2nd century, offers a detailed account of Mary's early life and her miraculous role in the Nativity. The Gospel describes how Mary was born to elderly parents, Joachim and Anna, as a gift from God. From a young age, she was dedicated to the temple and lived a life of purity. One of the Gospel's most famous lines reads, "Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bring forth a son, and he shall be called Emmanuel." This text not only deepens the story of Mary, but also highlights her role as the chosen vessel for God's plan. The Gospel includes details about Mary's betrothal to Joseph, explaining that he was chosen by divine intervention, with his staff miraculously blossoming to signify God's will. This story inspired many later depictions of Joseph in Christian art and traditions. The Gospel of Truth is less a story and more a reflection on salvation and enlightenment. It describes ignorance as the root of all suffering and knowledge as the path to freedom. One poetic line reads, "When the truth appeared, it brought freedom to all." What the Father has hidden is Jesus, and he was revealed by him. Great is the mystery of the Father. This line emphasizes the Gnostic belief that Jesus embodies the hidden knowledge of God, a divine mystery meant to awaken humanity to its true spiritual nature. This gospel presents Jesus as a teacher of cosmic truth, focusing on the restoration of humanity's divine origin. Its imagery, such as the Book of Life being returned to the Father, provides a deeply mystical interpretation of salvation. The Gospel of Thomas isn't like other Gospels. It's a collection of 114 sayings attributed to Jesus, focusing on self-discovery and spiritual enlightenment.
This Mother's Day, don't forget to... I wonder who that could be.
This week on Indomie Fan Club House.
But we want to go save the world!
Happy Mother's Day, my super mama. Happy Mother's Day.
But there's another special thing that's happening today.
What's happening?
Indomie Fan Club. Ooh la 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 la.
Change one person's perspective, it can change humanity as well. Simple conclusion, the church would lose control over the masses, and that is something they do not prefer. The text includes several cryptic sayings of Jesus not found in the Bible, such as, "Split a piece of wood, I am there, lift up the stone, and you will find me there." This emphasizes Jesus' presence in all aspects of creation, a concept unique to this gospel. What was Jesus like as a child? The Bible gives us no details, but the infancy Gospel of Thomas gives us a startling glimpse. Written in the 2nd century, this Gospel paints a vivid and sometimes unsettling picture of a young Jesus. One of the most famous stories involves Jesus crafting birds out of clay on the Sabbath. When scolded, he claps his hands, and the clay birds fly away. The Gospel reads, "I will make these clay birds fly, so you may know the power within me." However, young Jesus isn't always benevolent. In one shocking tale, he curses a boy who accidentally bumps into him, causing the child to drop dead. Later, Jesus heals a dying child and even resurrects a man, showing glimpses of the compassionate figure we know from the canonical Gospels. He was practicing his abilities and experimenting with different creatures. This raises the question, was he really the only one who can do that? Or there were others practicing with him? This text portrays Jesus as both divine and human, learning to balance immense power with humility, a side of him rarely explored. The Gospel contains a story where Jesus miraculously stretches a piece of wood for his father, Joseph, who was a carpenter. This small anecdote humanizes Jesus while also hinting at his divine powers, making it both relatable and extraordinary. The Gospel of Philip takes us deeper into the mystical side of Jesus' teachings. This text, part of the Nag Hammadi library, explores themes of love, unity, and divine connection. One passage has sparked endless debate. The companion of the Savior is Mary Magdalene. The Savior loved her more than all the disciples and kissed her often on her mouth. While some interpret this as evidence of a romantic relationship, others see it as a metaphor for spiritual union. Was that the missing piece of the puzzle that Leonardo da Vinci tried to show us in his famous painting, The Last Supper? What do we need to really focus on when reading the stories about Mary Magdalene? Was she really that bad? This gospel is one of the earliest sources to suggest that salvation comes through knowledge, gnosis, and the unity of the male and female elements symbolized by Jesus and Mary Magdalene. It also delves into the idea that physical relationships reflect spiritual truths. Now, let's turn to a gospel that redefines the role of women in early Christianity, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. This text, discovered in the late 19th century, presents Mary Magdalene not as a mere follower, but as a key leader and confidant of Jesus. "What is hidden from you, I will proclaim to you." Mary explains a vision she had of the ascent of the soul, describing how it must overcome the powers of darkness and ignorance to reach enlightenment and divine peace. She emphasizes spiritual liberation through understanding and inner truth. She shares profound teachings from Jesus, such as, "The soul is bound by chains of ignorance. Release yourselves from these chains, for only then will you be free." The Gospel describes secret teachings that Jesus shared with Mary. However, the male disciples doubt her authority, asking, "Why would the Savior reveal this to a woman?" This Gospel challenges patriarchal structures in Christianity, portraying Mary as an equal to the apostles, or perhaps even superior in spiritual understanding, because in fact, she was the first to witness Jesus after the resurrection. So, why her? According to her Gospel, Mary played a critical role in maintaining the early Christian community during a time of uncertainty. The Gospel of Peter provides a dramatic retelling of Jesus' trial, crucifixion, and resurrection. Its most striking feature is its vivid imagery, including a talking cross. One passage describes the resurrection as follows: "And they saw 3 men coming out of the tomb, 2 supporting the other, and a cross following them, speaking to the heavens. And the stone rolled of itself away from the entrance, and they opened it, and the young men entered. And the Jews said, 'Do not announce to anyone that he is risen, but let us give money to the soldiers and say, they stole him while we slept.'" This line reflects early Christian tensions with Jewish leaders, offering an alternative explanation for the resurrection narrative. Early church leaders like Serapion of Antioch initially accepted this gospel, but later condemned it for promoting Docetism, the idea that Jesus' suffering was merely an illusion. This theological conflict contributed to its rejection. Unlike the canonical Gospels, the Gospel of Peter emphasizes supernatural elements in the opening of the tomb. The Gospel of Nicodemus, also known as the Acts of Pilate, provides a dramatic retelling of Jesus' trial, crucifixion, and resurrection, with a unique focus on his descent into hell. The story begins with Jesus on trial before Pilate, who hesitates to condemn him. "Are you the king of the Jews?" Pilate asks. Jesus replies calmly, "My kingdom is not of this world." Despite Pilate's reluctance, the crowd demands Jesus' crucifixion, leading Pilate to wash his hands, saying, "I am innocent of this just man's blood." The Gospel vividly describes supernatural events as Jesus dies, darkness falls, the earth quakes, and the dead rise from their tombs. These signs mark his death as a cosmic event, with the centurion declaring, "Truly, this was the Son of God." The most unique aspect of the gospel is Jesus' descent into hell. Radiating divine light, he commands the gates of hell to open. Lift up your gates, and the King of glory shall enter in. Hades accuses Satan. You have brought ruin to my realm by bringing this man here. Jesus liberates the righteous souls, including Adam, David, and the prophets, declaring, I have come to bring salvation to those in darkness. This gospel includes detailed conversations between Pontius Pilate and the Jewish leaders, portraying Pilate in a more sympathetic light. It also introduces additional characters, such as two sons of Simeon, who rise from the dead and testify about Jesus. It's a powerful addition to the story of redemption, emphasizing Jesus' role as the savior of all humanity. Finally, we come to the most shocking gospel of all, the Gospel of Judas. Discovered in the 1970s and made public in 2006, this gospel flips one of the most infamous biblical stories on its head. Instead of portraying Judas Iscariot as a traitor, this gospel reveals him as Jesus' closest confidant, the only disciple who truly understood his mission. According to the text, Judas didn't betray Jesus out of greed but acted on his direct instruction.
Hey, what's the time?
When we synchronize, we win. When immunization campaigns align, outbreaks end. When countries work together, children are protected. The virus moves in real time, and so must we. Africa, it's our turn to end polio.
Profound controversy. What do you think? Could these texts hold secrets that we're not ready to understand? Or are they simply lost pieces of history? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Keep your minds open, and until we meet again. Did you know that Jesus is not the first Messiah? Long before Christ came to be, there was another who died. In ancient Jewish writings, there was a solid prophecy of two Messiahs. The first Messiah who would die in battle to prepare the path to final redemption, ushering in the second. But the Bible never tells us that Jesus died in battle. So if the Jewish texts were not talking about Jesus of Nazareth, then who was it? Who is the Messiah the world knew long before Jesus? And what happened to him? We'll find out together in this new episode of Secret Origins. Welcome. For centuries, many people have assumed that there's only one Messiah in Jewish tradition, but this is far from the truth. Tucked deep inside Talmudic, Kabbalistic, and apocalyptic writings is the mention of not one, but two Messiahs. Messiah ben David and Messiah ben Joseph. The first Messiah is well known to be the kingly redeemer from the line of David. However, the second one remains a mystery, an unexplainable figure hidden in the shadows of theology and time. His name is Messiah ben Joseph. Also known as the suffering servant, Messiah ben Joseph's story has been hidden for ages. Little wonder why, as the truth might shake you to your bones. According to ancient prophecy, Ben Joseph was meant to appear first, lead a war against evil, and die in battle. His death was not to be portrayed as a failure, but as a sacrifice. In return, this sacrifice would atone for the people and make way for the triumph of the second Messiah. But if such a noble goal was taught in the past, how come we've never heard of him? Because if Messiah ben Joseph existed, he would have already come, and his story was buried intentionally. If you wonder why anyone would bury such a story, think about this. The idea of a dying Messiah shakes the foundation of what most religions have built. If Ben Joseph really lived and died before the coming of Jesus, then it challenges both traditional Judaism and mainstream Christianity. This would mean that messianic redemption didn't begin with the Gospels. Instead, it began much earlier, with a forgotten figure whose death prepared the ground for everything that followed. So, was he erased to protect the simplicity of one Messiah theology? Or was his death too politically dangerous to remember? This is the story of the first Messiah, Ben Joseph. But before we delve into the full-blown story of Ben Joseph, let's take a moment to understand where it all began. Ancient Judaism. In modern Judaism, the Messiah is often imagined as a powerful king, a descendant of David who restores Israel's glory. But ancient sources suggest that this vision was only half the picture. When you read ancient texts like the Talmud, the Zohar, and writings of early rabbis, they clearly describe two messiahs. One is Messiah ben David, also known as the conquering ruler. And the other is Messiah ben Joseph, a warrior who comes first, fights the enemies of Israel, and dies before the final redemption. This is no fake theology. Even prominent scholars like Saadia Gaon and Nachmanides treated the two Messiah doctrine as a legitimate tradition. Ben Joseph was meant to die, and his death is no accident. It's a requirement, seen as a mystical sacrifice that clears the path for Ben David to rise. But somewhere along the way, this dual structure was lost, or do we say erased? Yes, you heard that right. Thankfully, some texts exist to ensure that this history is not fully lost to rewritten theology. Although most modern readers have never heard of Messiah ben Joseph, the Jewish tradition persisted through ancient texts. Let's look at some instances. In Talmudic commentary, Ben Joseph is mourned like a fallen hero. In Midrashim, he fights in the final war, but doesn't survive it. And in the Zohar, he's seen as the mystical bridge between darkness and redemption. Although each text seems to convey Ben Joseph's mission differently, the story is always the same. Messiah Ben Joseph appears before Ben David suffers first and dies in battle against Gog and Magog. Without him, there was no way redemption could begin. He died so that the second Messiah could rise. Now, what is the story of this suffering servant? Unlike Messiah Ben David, who brings peace and reigns gloriously, Messiah Ben Joseph's role is violent and tragic. His mission begins not with coronation, but with war. He is destined to lead Israel into a climactic battle. This battle is likened to the apocalyptic conflict against Gog and Magog. But victory isn't in his story. According to the Talmud, Sukkah 52a, Ben Joseph's fate is to die in combat. But here is the twist. He is not dying as a failure, but as a sacred sacrifice. In some texts, they say that his death serves as atonement for Israel's sins. In others, his death is branded as part of a cosmic strategy, one that clears the spiritual path for Ben David to arrive. This isn't the kind of Messiah people were waiting for. Why? It's because this is not glory, it's blood. However, in Jewish mysticism, suffering isn't defeat. It's the beginning of redemption. And in that suffering servant role, Messiah Ben Joseph became terrifyingly holy. The good part? Ben Joseph's death does not go unnoticed. From biblical scripture, Zechariah 12:10 is frequently quoted by rabbinic sources. The verse describes a nation mourning the one they have pierced. Ancient rabbis applied this verse to Messiah Ben Joseph, interpreting it as a prophecy of his fall. His death causes not just public grief, but heavenly alarm. If we are to dive into more mystical traditions, Ben Joseph's sacrifice sends ripples through the divine realms. His death cleanses collective guilt, rattles the heavens, and shakes the foundations of evil. To portray his role better, The Zohar suggests that his mission is to absorb judgment into himself, clearing the way for Ben David to bring peace. Without him, final redemption could not begin. But still, his name is barely known. But where did the talks of this first Messiah begin? The idea of Messiah ben Joseph didn't appear overnight. It grew from the cracks of ancient Judaism. During the Second Temple period, Jewish writings were filled with apocalyptic expectations, priestly tensions.
Introducing Mama's Pride soya oil for all your cooking and fries. It lasts longer in frying, has zero cholesterol for a healthy heart, omega-3 and 6, and vitamin A for good eyesight. Mama's Pride soya oil is produced from soya beans, which contains no cholesterol, available.
Their framework lays the foundation. A suffering, battle-bound Messiah from Joseph's line fits this pattern. It doesn't end there. To the Qumran sect, messianic redemption would be multi-staged, not singular. It would begin with judgment, suffering, and preparation before the second Messiah comes. What does this tell us? It means that Messiah ben Joseph wasn't invented later. He was already being expected. However, the deeper you dig, the older his shadow becomes. Most Bible scholars like to believe a jaw-breaking idea. They believe the servant songs in Isaiah, especially Isaiah 53, contain the earliest hints of a suffering messianic figure. He is despised and rejected, pierced for our transgressions. While mainstream Judaism later applied this to Israel collectively, early interpreters saw it as individual. Also, Zechariah 12 and Daniel 9 speak of a figure cut off before victory. It gets more interesting. Do you remember the Book of Enoch? Although the book is often linked with Second Temple mysticism, it also describes a pre-Redeemer figure cast in sorrow and sacrifice. When you put the pieces of text together, these scattered fragments show us that Jewish apocalyptic thought always expected a Messiah who would die first, before redemption could unfold. But surprisingly, later theology focused on kingship and glory. Before this rewritten version came to light, the first outlines of the Messiah were drawn in blood. Messiah ben Joseph had been etched into the blueprint of Jewish redemption from the very beginning. By now, you understand the story. Messiah ben Joseph came to suffer and prepare the path for the second Messiah. But which battle did he have to fight and die in to complete his mission? Enter the battle against Gog and Magog. In Jewish eschatology, the end of the world doesn't come quietly. It arrives with war, an all-consuming conflict. This war is known as the battle against Gog and Magog. This apocalyptic war is no minor detail. It's the very moment Messiah ben Joseph was born for. According to Talmud Sukkah 52a and other ancient texts, ben Joseph leads the armies of Israel into this final confrontation. His mission was straightforward: defeat chaos before it engulfs the world. But there's an unfortunate twist. He doesn't survive the battle. If you wonder why, it's because ben Joseph was prophesied to fall during this war. It was already written that he would be struck down in battle as nations rage and kingdoms collapse. His defeat sets the stage for Ben David's arrival, not as a warrior, but as a redeemer. And this redemption started with Ben Joseph's death on the battlefield. But why must Ben Joseph die? Historians offer an answer. It's because his death is an atonement. Have you heard about the scapegoat in Yom Kippur rituals? Just like that scapegoat or the blood sacrifices of the temple, Ben Joseph's death absorbs collective guilt. His suffering purifies the people, spiritually clearing the debris so that the real age of peace can begin. The Zohar even states that if the people were spiritually prepared, this death may have been averted. But historically, the expectation remains grim. Messiah ben Joseph was meant to fall. His story is often compared to Isaiah's suffering servant, pierced and crushed for others. His end causes mass mourning, echoing Zechariah 12:10. They shall look upon the one they have pierced. So, what happens after his death? Everything happens, because once the warrior fell, the king could finally rise. Despite the heart-wrenching story surrounding Ben Joseph, many still wonder, was he ever real? To some rabbis, he's entirely prophetic. That is, he's regarded as an end-time figure who hasn't yet appeared. But a more popular belief is that he already came, lived, fought, and died, long before the idea of Jesus ever entered the picture. This raises a troubling possibility for those in doubt. Could Ben Joseph have been a real historical person, mistaken for a failed rebel or martyr, while fulfilling a sacred role? After all, the Talmud never says when he'll appear. It only says he must die. Because of this, Ben Joseph's identity has ended up as a mystery. It's as if Jewish tradition wanted us to look but never recognize the man we were searching for. But if we stick to what many ancient texts testified, Ben Joseph did exist. And if Ben Joseph did exist, he was never meant to shine. His role was suffering, not glory. From the start, his destiny was silence, not kingship. When rabbinic sources speak about this figure, they insinuate that Ben Joseph's identity would only be fully understood after his death. When the mourning begins, when redemption unfolds, and when it's already too late to thank him. What if this is the reason his name is making the rounds today? Are we finally understanding his identity? This is why Ben Joseph is tagged as the Shadow Messiah, a figure whose impact is felt, not seen, a Messiah who prepares the world for salvation, but is forgotten by the time it arrives. And this feature opens the door to an even deeper mystery. Could some ancient figure lost to history have fulfilled this role already? A priest executed unjustly, a freedom fighter whose death rallied a people, a scapegoat whose sacrifice turned history around. If such a man existed, he might have died thinking he failed. But in the hidden script of divine redemption, his failure may have been the plan all along. Now, in the search for who might have played Ben Joseph's prophesied roles, many candidates make the list. But sitting at the top of this list is Simon Bar Kokhba, the revolutionary leader who waged war against Rome in the 2nd century CE. In those days, one of the most respected sages at the time, Rabbi Akiva, openly declared Bar Kokhba as the Messiah. He united the people, reclaimed Jerusalem, and even minted coins in his name. For a split moment, it seemed Israel's redemption had come. But after a while, catastrophe struck, and it came in the form of Rome's retaliation. The rebellion kick-started by Rabbi Akiva was crushed. Bar Kokhba was killed, and his movement had to end. To some avid followers, his failure disqualified him from being the Messiah. But to others familiar with Ben Joseph's prophecy, his defeat was the point. He was meant to be the warrior Messiah who fought and died before final redemption. So we ask, what if Bar Kokhba was Messiah Ben Joseph? Before you nod to that, you should know something. Bar Kokhba isn't the only figure scholars point to. Some look to Onias III, the murdered high priest whose mysterious death in the 2nd century BCE shook the temple system. There is more. Some rabbis point to Joshua ben Nun, the biblical leader from the tribe of Ephraim. This is someone who shares striking traits with Ben Joseph. Joshua ben Nun was a military leader who led Israel into the promised land without ruling it himself. The disqualifier, though, is that he is not from David's line. When you look deeper,
the work we put in is for generations to come. And now we soar together. Be the standout Swift.
Nivea Radiant and Beauty Even Glow helps reduce dark spots. Skin is for celebrating my shade of beautiful. Nivea is for skin.
was but recognizing the pattern, a figure who dies too soon, suffers without glory, and clears the stage for another to finish the mission, a Messiah who has to die for the second to come. But something interesting happens along the way. Although questions about Ben Joseph are slowly arising, there is no doubt that his story was suppressed. This is why, after the crushing defeat of the Bar Kokhba revolt, Jewish leadership faced a crisis. This crisis was not just about politics, but prophecy. Think about it from their perspective. The messianic hopes pinned on Bar Kokhba had collapsed. Thousands were dead. Jerusalem was in ruins. And worse, Rome now considered Jewish messianism a threat to imperial order. What would any sensible leader do in such a scenario? In response to the chaotic aftermath of the Bar Kokhba rebellion, rabbinic authorities swung into action. They began to reshape doctrine. This is because the two Messiah tradition sounded too much like failure. Even worse, it mirrored the growing Christian narrative of a crucified Redeemer. So to avoid confusion, many rabbis downplayed Ben Joseph's role or treated it as rather symbolic. Some references were left vague, while others were abandoned altogether. The idea of a suffering Messiah became dangerous territory, a narrative too difficult to control. In time, Messiah Ben Joseph became a whispered name in Kabbalah and Midrash. It was not rejected outright, no, just pushed quietly into the shadows. But here is the thing. Christianity also came into the picture and hijacked the script. While Rabbinic Judaism was busy pulling the Ben Joseph story into darkness, early Christianity was doing the opposite. And this is how. Followers of Jesus saw clear parallels between their teacher and the suffering Messiah archetype. The prophecies of Zechariah 12, Isaiah 53, and Daniel 9, texts many rabbis once linked to Ben Joseph, were now applied to Jesus of Nazareth. And in doing so, Christianity merged both roles into a single person. Messiah Ben Joseph and Messiah Ben David became one in the person of Jesus Christ. Of course, this theological shift had consequences. The distinct Jewish idea of two messiahs was replaced by a Christian model of a first coming in suffering and a second coming in glory. In no time, it got really intense for the rabbis. To protect Jewish identity, rabbis had to distance themselves from anything that resembled Christian claims. And so the two Messiah doctrine, which were once part of Israel's deepest messianic thought, was buried. Not because it wasn't true, but because it became inconvenient. If the two narratives had to coexist with such startling similarities, one would be branded as the liar. And with the rise of early Christianity, the loser was evident. But as Christianity emerged from the Jewish world, it didn't discard Jewish prophecy. Instead, it absorbed it. Early Christian writers began identifying Jesus not just as Messiah Ben David, the triumphant king, but also as the suffering servant, the warrior Messiah who dies. They found in Jesus the perfect combination of both roles. That is, a man who was crucified like Ben Joseph and who would return in glory like Ben David. Skeptics dare say that the merging wasn't accidental, but a theological strategy. Can you believe that? By combining both messianic roles into one figure, the early church gave Jesus an unparalleled depth. He was the lamb and the lion, the martyr and the king. But in between the lines, something was lost in the merger, the original distinction between both figures. Soon, Messiah Ben Joseph became a template, not a person. And over time, Christian doctrine buried the idea that two messiahs were ever expected at all. It was neater that way, true. But was it accurate? Hold on. Christian theologians have an answer to that. To justify this merger, they reinterpreted Hebrew prophecies. For instance, Isaiah 53's suffering servant was once seen by many Jewish sages as a reference to Ben Joseph, or collective Israel. But early Christians now declared it was Jesus. The pierced figure in Zechariah, the cut-off anointed one in Daniel 9, all rebranded to confirm his divine mission. This reframing didn't just reinterpret scripture, it rewrote it into a new story, one where Jesus didn't fulfill one role, but all roles. And once that became law, there was little room left for the earlier model. But when you look deeper, clues are lurking in the margins. While mainstream Christianity might have erased the name, Messiah Ben Joseph, fragments of his identity, seem to resurface in the apocryphal Gospels. That is, those early Christian texts that were excluded from the Bible. In ancient writings like the Ascension of Isaiah and the Apocalypse of Peter, we encounter messianic figures who suffer, descend into darkness, and die, not always in triumph, but in preparation. Some are resurrected, others simply vanish, awaiting vindication in the end times. Scholars have noted that these figures do not resemble the glorified Christ. Rather, they look like the blueprint of Ben Joseph, the suffering Messiah who acts as a gateway for the final redemption. In certain Gnostic traditions, this figure becomes even more abstract, sometimes split into two, sometimes disguised. He bleeds, he is betrayed, and he is misunderstood. But all the time, his death always serves a spiritual function. These aren't just theological quirks. They suggest that early Christians remembered more than they admitted. Beyond the texts, there were sects. That is, early followers of Jesus who may have preserved the two-Messiah model before orthodoxy shut it down. Groups like the Ebionites believed Jesus was a mortal man chosen by God. This is better aligned with Ben Joseph's role than Ben David's. Others, like certain Gnostic sects, separated Jesus' suffering body from his divine essence, implying that he fulfilled both Ben Joseph's and Ben David's roles. However, these versions of belief didn't last. You heard that right. They were branded as heresy, silenced, and shoved under the carpet. But the belief of these sects hints at something deeper. They point to a time when Christianity hadn't yet collapsed two messiahs into one, a time when Ben Joseph's mission still rang aloud. Over the centuries, scholars admit that the early church has polished its theology. The suffering Messiah gradually became divine, perfect, and singular. But in the shadows of early doctrine, there lies Ben Joseph. What do you think about this? Let us know in the comments, and remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Keep your minds open, and until we meet again. Long before Yahweh was recognized as the one true God, there was El. Yes, before the era of worship songs chanting Yahweh came to stay, there was a time when no one gave much thought to that name. This was because there was a more supreme God.
This is the true taste of home
and culture.
Chef of life.
Biblical texts, the name El appears in titles like El Elyon and El Shaddai. But as Yahweh rose in prominence, something strange happened in the background. El began to fade, not from memory, no, but from manuscript. And now, all we know is Yahweh. But this uncanny happening raises the question, how does a supreme God simply disappear? Or better put, how does another God take his place without anyone noticing? Perhaps it's because Yahweh was not alone. In the oldest biblical texts, we discover that Yahweh did not begin as the one God above all. Instead, he sat among others in a divine assembly ruled by El. When you read Deuteronomy 32:8 in the oldest texts, you see how El divided the nations among the sons of God. In the process of this division, Yahweh was assigned to Israel as a caretaker. He was not the original creator. But as time passed, Yahweh started sounding different. All of a sudden, he gained titles once reserved for El. People began to regard him as Most High and Everlasting. Verses were rewritten and references shifted without anyone noticing. Before anyone knew it, El was no longer distinct. He had been absorbed by Yahweh. But where did Yahweh originally come from? Unlike you thought, the earliest mentions of Yahweh do not come from Jerusalem or Sinai. Interestingly, they come from the southern deserts. We are talking about places like Edom, Seir, and Teman. These are regions outside the traditional Israelite territory. In Bible texts like Deuteronomy 33:2 and Judges 5:4, Yahweh is described as coming from Seir. This is a rugged highland territory associated with nomadic tribes. A peep into Egyptian records and you'll find an intriguing fact. Back in the 13th century BCE, the Egyptian records speak of a group called the Shasu of Yu. The Shasu were a group of nomadic people worshipping a deity called Yahweh in the same desert regions. Can you believe that? And at this time, Yahweh was not yet Israel's God. To the people of Shasu, it was a regional storm deity worshipped by desert clans. To them, Yahweh was a god of thunder, warfare, and wilderness. So how did this desert god end up as the god of creation? Many scholars believe that Yahweh was most likely adopted at first, then elevated. That is, he was brought into the Canaanite pantheon and gradually merged with its high god, El. And their explanation makes a lot of sense. But before you take it in, the earliest texts suggest something even more complex. According to the Dead Sea Scrolls, Deuteronomy 32:8 reads, "When the Most High, El Elyon, divided the nations, he fixed their boundaries according to the number of the sons of God." This version, which is also found in the Septuagint, depicts a clear picture. El Elyon was the Most High, and having such authority, he divided the assigned nations to various deities. To this effect, Israel was given to Yahweh. Yahweh did not choose the nation. He was assigned. Over time, the oldest versions were edited, and the sons of God were replaced with sons of Israel. No doubt, this blinded many to the reality of plural gods. However, that early version remains for those willing to search for it. It shows us that Yahweh was not always the God of all. He was one God among many, operating under the authority of a higher power. But if El was the head of Canaanite gods, and Yahweh underneath his rule, whose voice were the Israelites hearing in the beginning? Before Yahweh, the Canaanite world looked to El. Remember El, the all-powerful God, who wasn't just the father of all gods, but also the ruler of the heavens and the divine head of the pantheon. In ancient Ugaritic texts, El was described as a wise, eternal king, one who sat atop a mountain with lesser deities like Baal and Asherah surrounding his throne. This was the image that was planted in the minds of the Israelites. It doesn't end there. Many early biblical names reflect the same legacy described in the Ugaritic texts. For example, Israel means El rules, Bethel, which means house of El, and even El Shaddai, which was one of the earliest titles for Israel's God. In Genesis 17:1, El Shaddai appears to Abraham, and not Yahweh. At this point in history, El was not a fairy tale. He was the original deity of early Israelite religion. On the flip side, Yahweh's name is notably absent in these early accounts. So where was he? In the early stages of Israelite belief, El and Yahweh were distinct figures. You can see it in texts that refer to El Elyon as the Most High and Yahweh as a separate entity. In its ancient form, Deuteronomy 32:8-9 makes this relationship clear. That is, El divides the nations and assigns them to divine beings. Yahweh is given Israel. El still holds authority. In other verses like Genesis 49:25, El Shaddai is paired with blessings of fertility and protection. These are traits unlike the warrior god Yahweh would later become. But this duality didn't last forever. Over time, scribes began blending their identities layer by layer. Yahweh began to inherit El's titles, absorb his myths, and wear his crown. Eventually, El vanished. But before he did, there was a merger no one saw coming. At first, El and Yahweh stood apart. El was the ancient high god, and Yahweh was the desert warrior assigned to Israel. But as Israel's national identity deepened, something began to shift. Yahweh began absorbing El's traits, and this is how it happened. In many early texts, the names of both gods appear together. In Genesis 33:20, Jacob builds an altar and calls it El, the God of Israel. Pay attention, and you'll notice that this is a curious phrase that blends the two separate deities. Slowly, the merger was happening. Also, in Exodus 6:3, Yahweh says to Moses, "I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as El Shaddai, but by my name, Yahweh, I was not known to them." This is a quiet admission that the patriarchs worshipped El, not Yahweh. But by this point in the biblical timeline, the merger was already in motion. El's name remained, but his identity was being rewritten. The God of Israel was changing silently, so strategically that almost no one noticed. But how were the orchestrators able to pull this off? It's because the fusion of El and Yahweh wasn't just linguistic, it was systematic. At first, scribes and editors began weaving Yahweh into older traditions.
Avoid a money trap.
Make the trade, I leave trade. Make the trade, I leave trade.
It was a calculated rebranding. In later texts, Yahweh began showing up as creator, judge, and king. These were the same roles El had always held. In no time, the language of the texts was edited to give Yahweh universal reach, pushing El into the background without removing him outright. Seems like the perfect movie plot, right? In today's Bible, the merger is nearly invisible to casual readers, but beneath the translations and polished theology lies a clear truth. Two gods became one. And from this subtle act, a new belief system was born, monotheism. But before we talk about this new religion, let's look at how Yahweh dealt with another contender, Baal. In the ancient Levant, Yahweh wasn't the only god calling down thunder. Baal, the storm god of Canaan, was already well known. His worship stretched across cities like Ugarit and Tyre. The people of those cities knew Baal as the god who brought rain to the crops, thunder to the skies, and victory to kings. Like Yahweh, Baal was revered as a cloud rider, a divine warrior, and a protector of order. And that's where the real problem began. As Yahweh's identity grew beyond his desert origins, he began to look more and more like Baal. The very traits that made Baal powerful were gradually attributed to Yahweh. That's right, the lightning, thunder, storms, and even the power to conquer the sea. In this process of becoming supreme, Yahweh didn't just defeat Baal. He adopted the god and his legacy. And here is a little riddle for you. What do you do when your God's rival starts to look too familiar? The answer? Make sure he's remembered as a threat. Once Yahweh began absorbing Baal's role, Baal had to be reframed as an enemy. In stories like 1 Kings 18, we see Yahweh's prophet Elijah stage a showdown on Mount Carmel. Prophet Elijah mocks Baal's silence while Yahweh rains down fire. In the end, Baal's prophets are executed while Yahweh is exalted. But do you know that the story was more than narrative? Yes. It was theological erasure, and it didn't stop there. In addition, Baal's titles were repurposed. An early Israelite hymn, Psalm 29, mirrors Ugaritic Baal texts almost line for line, but with Yahweh as the storm giver. Can you imagine that? Even Yahweh's command over the chaotic sea is expressly similar to Baal's story. According to early texts, Baal once had a victory over Yam. In that victory, the chaotic sea was the hallmark. However, that was somehow rewritten to become part of Yahweh's biblical persona. What was once shared as a space for deities was no longer tolerated. In a way, Yahweh now wore Baal's crown, but condemned his name. And in the minds of a newly monotheistic people, there was no room for two gods of the storm. Just like that, Baal lost the war for superiority. But there wasn't just Baal to contend with. Matter of fact, early texts revealed that Yahweh might have had a partner whom he usurped from El. In modern Bibles, Yahweh is presented as singular, that is, he is unmarried, unchallenged, and unaccompanied. But the archaeological record tells a more complicated story. In 1975, at a remote desert site called Kuntilet Ajrud, archaeologists uncovered inscriptions from the 8th century BCE that shook biblical scholarship. One line read, "Blessed be you by Yahweh of Samaria and his Asherah." Who is this Asherah? This wasn't a fluke. A second inscription repeated the pairing, suggesting something deeper: shared worship. In the texts, Yahweh was linked to Asherah, who is the ancient Canaanite fertility goddess. She was often called the mother of the gods and the divine consort of El. This begs the thesis that sounds abominable. If Yahweh had merged with El, then it made sense that Asherah, El's wife, would follow. Inscriptions from early Israelite sites show that her veneration was not marginal, it was embedded. And yet today she is forgotten. So what happened to Yahweh's partner? This is what happened to Asherah. As Israel's priesthood gradually moved toward exclusive Yahweh worship, Asherah was silenced, and this shushing took place under King Josiah's reforms in the 7th century BCE. At his command, Asherah's wooden poles were cut down and her altars destroyed. Rebranded as a foreign impurity, the people began to see her as a Canaanite threat to Yahweh's holiness. Yet traces of her remained hidden in the language itself. The Hebrew word for sacred tree or pole is Asherah. Isn't this a reminder of her vast significance? Eventually, biblical redactors removed her name entirely from formal worship. Still, the archaeological footprint tells a different story, one where Yahweh and Asherah were worshipped together as divine king and queen. The question that bugs scholars is not just why she was erased, it's the way monotheism had to redefine Yahweh's character to survive without her. Because before he stood alone, Yahweh had a consort, and her name was Asherah. But another question rose to the surface. How did King Josiah manage to pull this off? It started like this. By the 7th century BCE, Yahweh had rivals, not just in the heavens, but in temples across Judah. Shrines dedicated to Asherah, Baal, and other deities were still active. Although many Israelites worshipped Yahweh primarily, they did so while worshipping other gods. This is the way they did it for generations. But in the reign of King Josiah, everything changed. The pluralism came to an abrupt end. According to older texts, 2 Kings 22-23 reveals that Josiah discovered a lost book of the law during temple repairs. Scholars say that this lost book was likely an early version of Deuteronomy. Once King Josiah found this book of the law, what followed was a radical campaign. Using his authority, he declared a massive destruction of rural altars, the burning of sacred groves, and the centralization of worship in Jerusalem alone. But King Josiah wasn't just cleaning up idolatry. With those commands, he was redefining Yahweh to be Israel's only God. This was the beginning of theological centralization. Suddenly, there was a shift from many shrines and many gods to only one God, one temple, and one people. But it gets more interesting. Historians found evidence to prove that the reform wasn't just religious, it was political. Wait, what? You heard that right. Josiah's reform was the turning point. This was where Yahweh's identity hardened into exclusivity. The Deuteronomistic editors who documented his reign left behind a carefully shaped narrative. Historians argue that while they were editing texts, their goal wasn't really to preserve history, but to control it. They portrayed Josiah as a righteous king who restored pure worship.
There are no shortcuts to trading, but it takes understanding market conditions. On our channel, we deliver market fundamentals, chart analysis, and a series discussing trading approaches used by historical traders. We examine their approaches and responses to past market conditions. Subscribe now to access market analysis and trading education all in one place.
Your email is your first online impression. Make it count. With GoDaddy Email, you get a professional address that matches your domain. It builds trust, boosts credibility, and helps grow your brand. Setup is quick, and your inbox is protected with built-in security. And if you ever need help, we're just a call away. Start building your brand, one email at a time.
Happened. Jerusalem fell. The massive temple was destroyed, the priesthood dismantled, and thousands of Israelites were exiled to Babylon. For a people whose identity was tied to one God and one land, this was a spiritual collapse. Yahweh, the deity who was supposed to protect them, had failed. Or so it seemed. Normally, you would expect a nation so distraught to give up all hope in this God who failed to protect them from being captured. But instead of such rebellion, something unexpected happened. While in exile in Babylon, something unexpected began to take shape among the Israelites. After the national catastrophe, the exiles didn't abandon Yahweh. Instead, they reconstructed him. Crazy, right? Slowly but surely, scribes and priests began to reinterpret Yahweh. Not as a failed protector, no, but as a righteous punisher. They started describing him as a God who had allowed the destruction because of Israel's sin. Modern scholars debate that this theological pivot was more than damage control. It was a genius transformation. Now Yahweh was no longer just a national God. He gradually became a cosmic judge, sovereign over all nations, using Babylon as his tool. Out of Israel's defeat came a new kind of power. And since there was no temple left to define him, Yahweh's reach became limitless. However, the exile did not just mark a turning point in history. Theology as a whole also felt the heat. Since the Israelites got cut off from Jerusalem, their scribes began to compile and edit older traditions. Ancient texts were revised, and any contradictions left were smoothed over. The rulers could not stand a divided identity about their God, so they made him one altogether. The result? A Yahweh who could no longer be questioned, only obeyed. The scribes did this upheaval in such a subtle manner that no one paused to question them. Stories once associated with El were reattributed to Yahweh. Promises, prophecies, and punishments were all centralized in him. What's more, even foreign gods were reframed as powerless. Isaiah 45 declares, "I am Yahweh, and there is no other." This is a declaration of authority in a way that gives no room for rivals. In exile, the people who had once worshipped many gods rewrote their future with only one. The Babylonian exile didn't just reshape the nation, it reshaped who they saw as God. The question is, was this a natural evolution, or a carefully engineered response to political trauma? Before the exile, Yahweh was the God of Israel. After the exile, he became the God of everything. Like we explained, this transition happened through redaction, that is, the careful editing of earlier texts to align with a new theology. Historians say that books like Genesis, Exodus, and Deuteronomy were reshaped. Passages that once hinted at divine counsels were flattened and reworded to present a world with only one God, Yahweh. The evidence? In older versions of Genesis, creation bore signs of plural voices. Let us make man in our image. But more recent interpretations insisted on singularity. How do you move from us to I so suddenly? By the time of 2nd Isaiah, the transformation was complete. Yahweh now claimed, "Before me no God was formed, nor will there be one after me." A once local deity had become the only deity, and the memory of those who once stood beside him. Quietly removed, scholars tag it as monotheism at its finest. As monotheism solidified, Yahweh's former peers vanished from the stage. The divine council, which was once a central concept in Israel, now became a problem. Texts like Psalm 82, which showed Yahweh among other gods, were reinterpreted or glossed over. Verses like Deuteronomy 32, 8 through 9, which once featured El dividing nations among the gods, were revised in the Masoretic text to read sons of Israel instead of sons of God. How crazy is that? You are right. It was a quiet change, line by line, scroll by scroll. Even Yahweh's inherited titles, Most High, El Shaddai, Creator, were stripped of their original context and assigned exclusively to him. The attributes of El, Baal, and others weren't discarded. Instead, they were all attributed to the one chosen God, Yahweh. By the time the Hebrew Bible reached its final form, monotheism had been solidified. History had been rewritten and handed down through generations. What could anyone do about it? Absolutely nothing. But the good part is, the oldest texts remember everything. In the oldest layers of the Hebrew Bible, El was the name of a distinct God. He was El Elyon, the Most High, and El Shaddai, God Almighty. These were titles deeply rooted in the older Canaanite pantheon. His name lives on in places like Israel, Bethel, and in figures like Samuel. These names show us that there was a time when El stood supreme. On the flip side, Yahweh's name appears much later, and in Exodus 6:3 we see, "By my name Yahweh, I was not known to them." But as theology shifted, scribes began to reassign El's names and traits to Yahweh. What was once two became one. Over time, Yahweh didn't just coexist with El, he replaced him, absorbing his vocabulary, status, and identity. What do you think about this? Let us know in the comments, And don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. Keep your minds open, and until we meet again. Some say the Antichrist will come from this tribe. Others say it vanished forever. The tribe of Dan was one of the original 12 tribes of Israel. And then it disappeared from the Bible. But its name shows up again in the Danube River, in Denmark, and in Irish legends. This is Secret Origins, and today we uncover the hidden path of the lost tribe of Dan. Welcome. The story of Dan begins in the book of Genesis, during a time when Jacob
So many choices. Sometimes it's nice not having to make any. Get maximum protection and fragrance. Nivea Men Deep Deer with Max Tech, powered by Black Carbon, that gives you 72 hours protection, along with a lasting dark wood fragrance. Skin is for playing it smart. Nivea is for skin.
Time, she gave her servant Bilhah to Jacob so that Bilhah could have a child. The child would be considered Rachel's, even if she didn't give birth herself. When Bilhah gave birth to a son, Rachel named him Dan. She said, "God has judged me and heard my voice." The name Dan comes from the Hebrew word for judge. It was her way of saying that God had seen her suffering and given her justice by allowing her to have a son through Bilhah. Dan was Jacob's 5th son, and even though he was born to a servant, he was treated as a full member of the family. Dan would later become the founder of one of the 12 tribes of Israel. Each of Jacob's sons became the patriarch of a tribe, and these tribes would form the foundation of the Israelite people. When Jacob was old and near death, he called all of his sons to give them special blessings. These blessings were not just kind words from a father. In the Hebrew tradition, they were considered prophetic messages that pointed to the destiny and future character of each tribe. They revealed strengths, weaknesses, and symbolic traits that would define the group of people descending from each son. But what Jacob said about Dan was very different from what he said to the others. In Genesis 49:16-17, Jacob said, "Dan will provide justice for his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan will be a snake by the roadside, a viper along the path that bites the horse's heels so that its rider tumbles backward." The first part sounds good. Dan will judge his people, which means he will have authority and be a leader. But the second part is strange and harder to understand. Jacob compares Dan to a snake, hiding by the road and striking when no one expects it. In the Bible, snakes can mean many things. Sometimes they are clever, and sometimes they are dangerous. They can represent wisdom, hidden power, or deceit, depending on the context. But they are always hard to see, and they act in secret. This made people wonder, why did Jacob use such an image for his own son? Was it a compliment, or was it a warning? This unusual blessing was the first sign that the tribe of Dan might have a mysterious future, and one that would not be easy to understand. When the Israelites entered the Promised Land, each of the 12 tribes received a piece of land. The tribe of Dan was given territory along the western coast of Canaan. This area had good land and access to the sea, which made it important for farming and trade. Its location also gave it great potential for contact with other cultures through ports and coastal routes. But there was a big problem. The land was already controlled by the Philistines. The Philistines were strong, well-organized, and known for using advanced weapons made of iron. Unlike many other local groups, they had mastered iron tools and war strategies. They built fortified cities, trained warriors, and dominated the coastal areas. They often fought against the Israelites and made life very difficult for the Danites. Battles were common, and the Philistines did not easily give up their territory. Over time, the tribe of Dan was pushed out of the coastal region and forced into the nearby hills. They were unable to fully take control of their land. This made the tribe feel weak and unsafe, especially compared to other tribes who were more successful in settling their regions. Because they could not settle in their assigned land, the Danites decided to look elsewhere. They sent out scouts to find a new place to live. This was a risky move, but it showed their determination to survive. In the book of Judges, chapter 18, it says that they sent 5 spies to search the north of the land. These men discovered a peaceful and isolated city called Laish. The people there lived quietly, with no strong army or nearby allies to defend them. The Danites saw this as their chance. They gathered 600 warriors, traveled north, and attacked the city. It was a surprise attack, and the city fell quickly. They took it by force, destroyed it completely, and then rebuilt it in their own name. They called it Dan. This new city was far away from the other tribes, near the base of Mount Hermon in the far north of Israel. It became their new home, but it also separated them from the rest of the Israelite tribes. In their new home, the tribe of Dan created its own place of worship. Instead of going to the holy places approved by God, they made a carved image and set it up like an idol. They chose their own priests, who were not from the tribe of Levi. According to the Bible, only Levites were allowed to be priests in Israel, and this act was against God's commandments. This decision to build their own worship center marked the start of Dan's spiritual fall. While other tribes followed the laws given through Moses, Dan followed their own path. Over time, this led to them being seen as outsiders in the religious life of Israel. And then, something even more surprising happened. In the book of Revelation, the final book of the New Testament, the Apostle John writes a vision of the end times. In one part of the vision, 12,000 people from each of the 12 tribes of Israel are sealed by God. This seal is a mark of protection and favor, given before a time of great judgment. The list represents the faithful remnant of Israel that will be saved. But Dan is missing. Instead of Dan, the list includes the tribe of Manasseh, the son of Joseph. This has confused scholars, historians, and religious thinkers for many centuries. Dan was one of the original 12 tribes. Why would it suddenly disappear from such an important prophecy? One theory comes from early Christian thinkers who believed that Dan's absence was not a mistake, but a warning. Among them was Irenaeus, a bishop from the 2nd century. He was one of the most influential early theologians and wrote a famous work called Against Heresies. In it, he tried to explain how certain people or groups could play a role in future evil. He wrote that the Antichrist, the great deceiver who would rise in the end times, could come from the tribe of Dan. Irenaeus looked at Jacob's ancient prophecy in Genesis, where Dan is called a serpent by the road, who bites the horse's heels. In the Bible, the serpent is one of the most loaded symbols. From the serpent in the Garden of Eden to the fiery serpents in the desert, it is often linked to deception, danger, spiritual rebellion, or divine judgment. For many believers, it was no coincidence that Dan was given this image. Over time, this idea grew. Other early Christian writers, like Hippolytus of Rome also supported the theory. Hippolytus was one of the first to write
Maggie chicken flavor with onions, celery, and turmeric. My game changer.
With Udemy, there's a world of possibility at your fingertips. With one click, you're in the leading online marketplace for learning and skills. Want to become an AI expert? This is learning from real-world experts around the globe. Want to awaken your artistic side? This is learning your way. Want to switch professions? Help your team reskill? This is Udemy, the power of possibilities.
Dan might have gone. We need to go back a few steps. After the time of King Solomon, the kingdom of Israel split into two parts. The northern part kept the name Israel, and the southern part became Judah. This division weakened the people politically and spiritually. The northern kingdom, where the tribe of Dan belonged, quickly fell into instability. Kings came and went, many of them disobeying God's laws. The kingdom often turned to idol worship and foreign alliances, which made them vulnerable. But this new kingdom did not last long. Around 722 BC, the powerful Assyrian Empire invaded and conquered the northern tribes. The Assyrians were known for their brutal tactics, mass deportations, forced labor, and population mixing. Many Israelites were taken away into exile. Others fled to avoid capture. Some simply disappeared from the records. This event became known as the scattering of the lost tribes of Israel. Dan was one of those tribes. But while most of the scattered tribes left little trace, the tribe of Dan may have had an advantage that helped them survive. Unlike the others, the Danites were known for something special. They knew how to travel by sea. In the book of Judges, chapter 5, there is a line that says, "And why did Dan remain in ships?" This short sentence tells us something important. While other tribes stayed on land, Dan had experience with boats and ships. They may have worked as traders, fishermen, or sailors. Some may have even lived part of their lives along the coast or on the water itself. This skill made them different. It gave them mobility when others were trapped. When the Assyrians came, many tribes had nowhere to go. But the Danites may have taken to the water. They could have escaped by sea. And they may have sailed away, possibly in many directions. But if Dan escaped by sea, where did they go? Did they settle in nearby lands? Did they cross the Mediterranean? In time, strange clues began to appear, not in the Middle East, but across Europe. Many researchers noticed something curious. Some of the biggest rivers, regions, and people groups in Europe carried names that sounded like Dan. The Danube River, which flows through Central and Eastern Europe, has held that name since ancient times. Some ancient texts even call it Danuvius, which may share the same root. In the far north, the Danish people still live in a country called Denmark, which literally means Mark of Dan. Some scholars suggest that early settlers there may have named the land after their tribal identity. And in Ireland, old legends speak of a mysterious people called the Tuatha De Danann, translated as the tribe of the goddess Danu. They were said to be wise rulers linked to serpents and transformation. Were these just random similarities? Or could they point to something more? Language and place names often carry hidden stories. When the same root appears in multiple regions, it can suggest shared origins or migrations. And as more evidence was studied, the pattern grew stronger. In several ancient European cultures, powerful leaders and clans had names like Dan, Dana, or Danu. These names often showed up in places of authority and tradition. Some were tied to rulers or elite classes, others to priestly or warrior groups. It didn't seem like these groups were poor wanderers. In fact, it looked like they came with skills. But that's not all. Alongside the names, symbols began to appear too, some of them deeply tied to the tribe of Dan. In Italy and Scandinavia, noble families used serpents in their coat of arms as signs of power and judgment. In some cases, the serpent wrapped around swords, shields, or royal crests, suggesting a connection to justice, cunning, and authority. Archaeology supports these ideas. Across parts of Europe, tools and weapons from this period show sudden advances in metalworking. In some areas, there's evidence of copper and bronze work that appears more refined than local traditions. Complex laws and social systems began to appear in regions where such order hadn't existed before. Some regions also developed new religious or ritual practices, possibly brought by newcomers. In coastal areas, we find signs of long-distance trade and navigation, pointing to people who knew how to sail, organize commerce, and build new societies. And after everything we've seen, the tribe of Dan's mysterious disappearance, their strange symbols showing up in Europe, and their possible influence on kingdoms and legends, many researchers began asking a serious question. What if Dan wasn't forgotten by accident but on purpose? Some historians and Bible scholars believe that the identity of the tribe of Dan may have been erased deliberately. The reason? Because if Dan really became part of Europe's royal families, or helped shape early civilizations with their knowledge of navigation, metalwork, and law, it would change the stories that both religion and politics have told for thousands of years. For example, if rulers in Ireland, Denmark, or France came from a Hebrew tribe, it would connect European history directly to the Bible in a way that many people never expected. This could challenge both religious traditions that claim Dan was lost forever, and political traditions that teach those kingdoms rose independently. That kind of connection might make some historians, and even governments, uncomfortable. It's also important to remember that history is often written by the winners. When new leaders or empires take power, they sometimes try to hide or change the past. Maybe Dan's symbols were reused, but the name of the tribe was taken out of official records, so no one would ask too many questions. Some early Christian writers called Dan dangerous. Others accused them of idolatry or betrayal. Over time, these ideas could have helped justify erasing Dan's story from the Bible's most important ending, Revelation. But here's something to think about. Why erase a tribe, unless they were never truly gone? Maybe Dan didn't vanish. Maybe they just became harder to recognize. Some researchers believe the tribe of Dan never truly vanished. They think the tribe survived by embedding its identity into symbols, which were later adopted by secret groups and hidden traditions. Let's go back to the time of the Knights Templar. These warrior monks lived during the Middle Ages and became one of the most powerful groups in Europe. They protected Christian pilgrims, built castles, and even managed money like early bankers. Their influence stretched across continents, but they were also connected to many mysterious stories, including rumors that they discovered ancient relics and hidden truths buried in the Holy Land. Some believe the Templars discovered ancient knowledge, possibly even connected to the tribe of Dan. This theory suggests
How to avoid a money trap.
Make tip trade, I limp trade. Make tip trade, I limp trade.
How to break the barriers and start small.
Make tip trade, I limp trade. Make it trade, I limp trade.
Learn more about a limp trade.
Freemasons are a secretive society that became very popular in Europe after the Middle Ages. They use many symbols, like the square and compass, the all-seeing eye, and twin pillars. Some of these are also found in old stories about Dan, especially the idea of building, judging, and guarding knowledge. But that's not all. During the same period, strange books began to appear. These were called alchemical texts. Alchemy was a mix of science, magic, and philosophy. Alchemists wanted to turn metal into gold, find eternal life, and unlock the secrets of the universe. These goals sound mythical, but they were taken seriously in secret circles. These books were filled with strange pictures of hidden stars and codes that only a few people could read. However, what matters for this story is that in many of these books, they often illustrated serpents biting their own tails. Sounds familiar? But there is an even stranger theory. While many people believe the tribe of Dan went north into Europe, others think some of them went south into Africa. These ideas come from real communities that exist today, and what they say about their past is truly surprising. One of the most well-known groups is the Beta Israel, or Ethiopian Jews. For centuries, they lived in the mountains of Ethiopia, following ancient Hebrew laws. They kept the Sabbath, avoided certain foods, and celebrated feasts that came from the Old Testament. They even claimed they were part of the tribe of Dan, a group that left Israel during times of war and settled in Africa. Another group is the Igbo people of Nigeria. Some Igbo families believe they are descended from ancient Israelites too. They also practice male circumcision on the 8th day, avoid pork, and celebrate traditions that are very similar to Jewish customs. Some of them even say they are from Dan's tribe. Then there's the Lemba tribe of southern Africa. Like the others, the Lemba keep Hebrew-style laws, celebrate sacred days, and have a priestly group called the Buba, which reminds some scholars of the ancient Jewish priesthood. What's even more interesting is that DNA tests have shown that many Lemba men carry a special genetic marker also found in Jewish priests from the Middle East. So, is this proof that the tribe of Dan went to Africa? Not quite. Scientists agree that these groups likely have ancient Middle Eastern roots. But when it comes to proving exactly which tribe they came from, like Dan, Levi, or another one, it gets difficult. Too much time has passed. People have moved, mixed, and changed. Oral stories can fade. Genetic evidence can only tell us part of the picture. Still, the signs are there. If the tribe of Dan traveled by ship, maybe they didn't just go north into Europe. Maybe some of them sailed south, into Africa. Maybe the serpent trail was never in just one place. So yes, the Bible stops mentioning the tribe of Dan after a certain point, but that definitely doesn't mean they were lost forever. Just think about it. The tribe of Dan had special skills. At that time, much of Europe was not very developed, and those skills would have been valuable not just for survival, but for building more advanced societies. A group like that wouldn't simply disappear. They would be welcomed by other cultures or blend in and slowly shape the people around them. So, what do you think happened to the tribe of Dan? Let us know in the comments. And if you know of any clues we didn't mention, we'd love to hear them. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next mystery. Keep your minds open, and until we meet again. Did you know the pyramids of Egypt may not have been built just as tombs? For thousands of years, stories have told of secret schools hidden beneath the temples and stone passageways, places where pharaohs and high priests prepared for something far greater than ruling on earth. They were trained to walk in the realm of the gods. But what really happened inside these hidden chambers? What kind of knowledge was so dangerous it had to be locked away in stone? And most importantly, what did the pharaohs learn that ordinary people were never meant to know? We'll find out together in this new episode of Secret Origins. Welcome. For thousands of years, The pyramids of Egypt have amazed people from every corner of the world. Most of us grew up believing they were only tombs for pharaohs. But old legends tell a different story. They speak of secret chambers and hidden hallways deep under the temples and pyramids. These places, according to the stories, were not made for burial. They were built for learning and for transformation. Only a few could enter: pharaohs, high priests, and sometimes the most trusted. Your mind, but your soul. We know of these teachings thanks to an ancient writer named Clement of Alexandria. He lived in Egypt during Roman times, long after the pyramids were built. Clement described 42 sacred books used by the priests of Egypt. These books, he said, contained everything: their philosophy, their science, their rituals, their knowledge of the stars, of medicine, and of the gods. But could these books be the curriculum of the secret schools beneath the stone? Modern archaeology is beginning to reveal clues that match these legends. In 2017, scientists used advanced scanning technology on the Great Pyramid of Giza. What they found were large, mysterious voids hidden inside the pyramid. The purpose of these spaces is still unknown, but some believe they may have been special rooms for powerful rituals of death and rebirth. Even more dramatic is what was found beneath the step pyramid of Saqqara. There, archaeologists uncovered over 5 kilometers of underground tunnels and chambers. Many of the passages were false, designed to confuse anyone who entered. Some scholars now believe this labyrinth was not only a tomb, but also a place of spiritual training. To survive, people had to learn to master fear and to guide themselves in the dark. In 2025, archaeologists uncovered a massive 3,600-year-old tomb near Abydos, one of Egypt's holiest cities. But of course, many believe this is more than just an ordinary burial site. Abydos was already known as the burial place of kings and the center of the cult of Osiris, god of the dead. The discovery suggests that Abydos may still hold many untold secrets, and that its role in ancient Egypt was even more significant than previously thought. But these discoveries leave us with a deeper question. Why would the Egyptians go to such lengths to hide these places? What kind of training was so secret and so powerful that it had to be buried?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Please fasten your seatbelts. We're in for a thrilling ride. Flight time will be non-stop until the buzzer, and we'll be cruising above the rim. Temperature on the court will be hot, with unexpected cold moves. Cabin crew, we're cleared for Season 6 tip-off. It's takeoff time. BAL, rise with the game.
Schools were trained to walk the duat while still alive. They memorized entire scrolls of instructions, most famously the Book of the Dead, which was known to them as the Book of Coming Forth by Day. These texts described a soul standing before a massive gate, facing a guardian who demanded the exact words to let them pass. Speaking the secret password opened the way, granting safe passage deeper into the duat. A demon with blazing eyes stopped in its tracks when the traveler recited a spell that placed it back under divine order. A serpent made of fire curled away when its sacred name was spoken aloud, forced to retreat into darkness. Each encounter rewarded precision, courage, and mastery of the rituals. Knowing the right words moved the traveler forward through the 12 gates, past lakes of fire and countless dangers until they reached the final court of Osiris. But why would they study this path before dying? The Egyptians believed that preparation was everything. Only those who mastered the secrets of the duat while alive could hope to survive its dangers after death. To them, immortality was a skill to be learned. One of the most striking pieces of evidence comes from the papyrus of Ani, one of the most complete copies of the Book of the Dead. In it, we see Ani, a royal scribe, standing before the god Osiris. His heart is being weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and order. If his heart was heavier than the feather, weighed down by sin or dishonesty, it would be devoured by Amut, a monster part lion, part hippopotamus, and part crocodile. But if his heart was pure, Ani would be allowed to pass into the eternal fields of peace. This image captures the central idea of the Egyptian afterlife. Survival depended on preparation, on purity, and on knowing the right knowledge at the right time. And as you know, the Egyptians went further than almost any other culture in these preparations. Their priests developed entire rituals to rehearse death. In chambers deep beneath temples, initiates would lie in coffins or in dark rooms, reciting the words of the Book of the Dead, as if already crossing into the duat. The goal was not to pretend, but to truly separate the soul from the body for a time. And as you will soon see, there is some evidence that the ancient Egyptians may have actually succeeded in doing this physically. For the ancient Egyptians, knowledge alone was not enough. The body also had to be prepared. They believed the soul was made of many parts, but the three most important were the Ka, or life force, the Ba, or personality, and the Ak, the spirit of light. For these to reunite in the afterlife, the physical body had to remain intact. If the body decayed, the soul would be lost. This is why mummification was not simply preservation, but a whole spiritual technology. By carefully drying, wrapping, and protecting the body, the priests were building a vessel that could last for thousands of years. Every step of the process was filled with meaning. The ritual of opening the mouth was one of the most sacred. After the body was wrapped, priests would touch the lips and eyes of the mummy with special tools, symbolically restoring the ability to eat, drink, see, and speak in the afterlife. Another important detail is that the heart was always left in place. Unlike the brain, which was often removed, the heart was seen as the true seat of thought and consciousness. This shows us how differently the Egyptians viewed the human being. For them, memory, identity, and judgment all lived in the heart. And since the heart would one day be weighed in the halls of Osiris, it had to stay with the body. Even the choice of resins and wrappings had meaning. The materials slowed decay, but they also symbolized purity and divine protection. The body became something like a battery, charged to keep the connection between soul and flesh alive across dimensions. Some scholars even argue that the pyramids themselves, aligned with the stars, acted as amplifiers of this process. But what if the whole practice of mummification was not about death at all, but about keeping the soul active and present, able to cross between worlds? Think about it. These bodies have lasted for over 3,000 years. When you stand in front of a mummy today, you are looking at a person who believed they would need that same body to live again. It's clear just how advanced the ancient Egyptians were, and it's no surprise that many today believe they possessed a high level of consciousness, operating on higher frequencies. This included training the mind in ways that were nothing short of extraordinary for their time, over 5,000 years ago, while our science is only now beginning to uncover such possibilities. But what exactly were they capable of? We mentioned earlier the separation of the soul from the body. In the hidden chambers beneath Egypt's temples, students of the mystery schools were trained to leave their physical form willingly, traveling in what they described as the car to faraway lands, to sacred sites, and even to realms beyond the living. The idea sounded simple, but mastering it took years of discipline. What was meant to happen during astral projection began with stillness. The body had to be perfectly at rest, every muscle relaxed, every breath slow and steady. This stillness was the anchor that kept the body safe while the soul prepared to move. Only then could the conscious self begin its journey, slipping gently away from the physical shell. With the body secure, the traveler could drift into unseen spaces, crossing vast distances without taking a single physical step. Some accounts speak of initiates visiting temples hundreds of miles away and returning with knowledge they could not have seen with their own eyes. Modern researchers sometimes compare this to what we call out-of-body experiences, or remote viewing. There are experiments from the late 20th century, such as those funded by the US military, where participants claim to describe secret facilities in other countries without ever leaving a locked room. Whether coincidence or unexplained perception, the similarity to the Egyptian accounts is hard to ignore. Maybe this doesn't sound so impossible, but remember, the ancient Egyptians lived over 5,000 years ago, at a time when many other civilizations were still learning to build simple mud brick houses. If it's true that they could master something like astral projection, that's astonishing, because even today, science struggles to fully understand or reproduce it. Recent neuroscience experiments use virtual reality, sensory manipulation, and brain stimulation to create the feeling of floating outside yourself. The Egyptians, on the other hand, without wires or machines, used sound, rhythm, and deep meditation to achieve something similar, or perhaps something far more real. However, as many scientists today believe, the ancient Egyptians didn't stop at astral projection. Once initiates could travel beyond their bodies, their training moved toward the next step, speaking with those who no longer walked the earth. We already mentioned that in their view, death was not the end. It was just a change of state. So it's no surprise that the ancient Egyptians believed the dead could still speak, guide, or even warn the living. Egyptian ritual texts speak of entering halls filled with the voices of the departed. These were not random whispers, but intentional conversations. The traveler might seek out an ancestor for advice, a deceased high priest for hidden knowledge, or even a god for divine instruction. This is where modern parallels get interesting. Mediumship and channeling, where a living person conveys messages from spirits, have been studied in controlled settings. In some cases, the person shares verifiable information they could not have known. Scientists remain divided, with some pointing to subconscious memory, others to unexplained phenomena. But the idea that thoughts can pass from one mind to another, across distance, or even across the boundary of life and death, continues to fascinate. But how did the Egyptians achieve this, and was it really possible? The Egyptians knew that the human mind could be influenced not only by what it saw, but by what it heard, and more importantly, by what it felt. Sound was one of their most powerful tools. In the quiet halls of their temples, priests used deep, resonant chants that would roll through the stone walls and echo in long, vibrating waves. These vibrations were felt in the chest, in the bones, even in the skull. Modern science has confirmed something remarkable. Certain sound frequencies, such as 432 Hz and 528 Hz, can create strong resonance in both air and solid matter. They can cause water to ripple, stone to hum, and even influence brain activity. Scientists today call this brainwave entrainment, a process where sound gently guides the brain into specific states, deep relaxation, dreamlike imagery, or intense focus. For the ancient Egyptians, reaching these states may have been the entire point. They were creating a controlled environment where the mind could shift into a higher state of awareness. In modern terms, this is similar to meditation, breathwork, or certain sound therapies used today to lower stress, sharpen focus, or even trigger vivid mental visions. The Egyptians believed that in these states, a person could more easily receive messages from their own higher self, from the spirits of the dead, or even from divine beings, and the way they did it was truly incredible. Archaeologists and acoustic engineers studying ancient temples, such as the Temple of Hathor at Dendera and the Great Pyramid's King's Chamber, have found that their architecture naturally amplifies certain sound frequencies. The chambers act almost like musical instruments, turning a single voice or drum beat into a deep, rolling vibration that seems to come from all directions at once. Many believe this was their method for reaching a higher vibrating state, a condition where the body is calm, but the mind feels open and expansive, as if tuned to a different channel. Today, people try to achieve this through meditation, sound baths, or special breathing techniques. In ancient Egypt, the temples themselves were the instruments, and the priests were the conductors. Some researchers suggest that in this heightened state, the Egyptians believed they could communicate with beings not from our world, what we might today call extraterrestrials. This could, they argue, explain why Egypt seems so advanced for its time, with knowledge of astronomy, engineering, and medicine that feels centuries ahead. Others believe the voices they sought were not alien, but ancient, coming from civilizations long vanished, for example, Atlantis. According to this theory, the Egyptians inherited fragments of wisdom from a people who lived before the great floods, carrying forward their understanding of the stars, sacred geometry, and spiritual science. Whether you believe in otherworldly visitors or forgotten civilizations, there's a good chance that sound was their bridge, the key to shifting consciousness and opening doors to realms beyond the ordinary senses. Some believe that those who succeeded here were invited to attempt something far more dangerous, rehearsing their own death. And where would this take place? Most of you can probably guess. The King's Chamber, hidden deep within the heart of the Great Pyramid of Giza, was first entered in modern times in the early 19th century, when explorers forced their way through ancient passageways blocked for centuries. It sits at the very center of the pyramid structure, perfectly aligned on the north-south axis, and is constructed entirely of massive granite blocks, some weighing over 70 tons. The room measures roughly 10.5 meters by 5.2 meters, with a height of about 5.8 meters. At first, scholars assumed it was simply a burial chamber for Pharaoh Khufu, the pyramid's builder, yet no treasures, no mummies, and none of the usual signs of a royal burial were ever found there. This fact has led many to wonder whether its true purpose was something far different from what history books tell us. But recent acoustic studies have revealed something remarkable. When someone makes a sound in the King's Chamber, even just a hum, the room itself starts to sing back at a special low tone, about 117 times per second. For a stone room this big, that's surprisingly high, and it's very close to vibrations that many people today think can be good for the mind and body. This happens because the granite walls are very dense, and the shape of the room makes the sound bounce in a special way. These kinds of tones are known today to sometimes affect how the brain works and how we feel. Such findings give weight to long-standing theories that the space was designed not only for physical functions, but also for experiences meant to affect the mind, suggesting the ancient builders understood properties of sound and stone that modern science is only now beginning to confirm. And on top of that, the Great Pyramid was not placed at random. Its alignment and proportions reveal a deep understanding of mathematics, astronomy, and the natural world. The structure is oriented to true north, with an error margin of less than 0.05 degrees. a feat that even modern builders find challenging without advanced tools. This accuracy suggests they were using methods far beyond simple sightlines, possibly relying on precise astronomical observations of the stars. Many researchers have noted that the three main pyramids mirror the positions of the stars in Orion's belt. In ancient Egyptian belief, Orion was linked to Osiris, the god of the afterlife. Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, was associated with the goddess Isis. The rising of Sirius each year marked the flooding of the Nile, an event critical for agriculture. By aligning their monuments with these celestial markers, the Egyptians not only honored their gods, but may have synchronized their architecture with natural cycles. Sacred geometry played a key role in their designs. Ratios like the golden section, 1 to 1.618, appear in the pyramid's dimensions, as do proportional relationships found in the Ankh, the ancient symbol of life. These ratios reflect patterns found in nature, from seashell spirals to the way plants grow, and it doesn't stop there. The pyramid texts, some of the oldest religious writings on Earth, describe the pharaoh's journey to the stars, using the pyramid as a kind of cosmic launch point. Scholars have also found that the Egyptians understood the precession of the equinoxes, a slow shift in the Earth's axis that changes the position of the stars over thousands of years. This knowledge would have required centuries of careful observation. Beyond astronomy, their mastery extended into engineering and material science. The precision cutting of multi-ton limestone and granite blocks, the transport of these stones from quarries miles away, and the seamless fitting of each piece, all without mortar, remain astonishing. They also demonstrated advanced hydrological knowledge. Some theories suggest the internal shafts and passages of the pyramids could have interacted with groundwater to generate energy or sound, creating an environment for altered states of consciousness. While still debated, this aligns with their apparent use of acoustic resonance in other temples, such as the Temple of Hathor at Dendera. Mathematics underpinned all of these achievements. They calculated slopes, volumes, and alignments with remarkable accuracy. Some measurements in the Great Pyramid correspond to the Earth's circumference and the length of the solar year when converted into certain units, leading to speculation that they held a level of geodetic knowledge that would not appear again for millennia. And because of all this, it really seems like the ancient Egyptians did nothing by accident. Suddenly, the idea that advanced consciousness techniques were once widely practiced doesn't seem so far-fetched. But you're probably wondering, why can't we say for sure that such practices and secret knowledge really existed and came from the ancient Egyptians? Well, many believe the answer lies in the Book of Thoth. Ancient writings describe this book as a record of the highest knowledge, teachings said to grant mastery over cosmic cycles, the hidden forces of nature, and even the powers of the human mind. The story goes that only the most disciplined and morally pure initiates could study it, because one mistake in its application could destroy not only the practitioner, but everyone around them. By the 19th and 20th centuries, occultists and members of the Theosophical movement began to weave their own theories around the book. They claimed the original text may have been deliberately hidden or destroyed perhaps by Egypt's own priesthood, or later by Greek, Roman, or even church authorities to prevent its secrets from spreading. According to them, this was protection against knowledge that could lift humanity to higher states of consciousness, or plunge it into chaos. Some researchers and writers suggest that parts of this knowledge may have survived in fragments, preserved in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, while the rest was lost through intentional destruction or passed down only in secret circles. If true, it means that the most powerful chapters of Egypt's wisdom never reached the public. So, what do you think? Did the ancient Egyptians truly master a hidden spiritual technology? a way to shape the mind, body, and soul to reach higher states of being? Or have we only uncovered fragments of a far greater system, now lost to time? Whatever the answer, maybe one day we'll unlock the full extent of their knowledge. But until then, we can only wonder, do we truly deserve to call ourselves an advanced civilization, when all signs suggest they may have been far ahead of us? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and if you believe more people should discover Egypt's secrets, give this video a thumbs up to help spread the word. Keep your minds open, and until we meet again. Did you know that a race of superhumans is missing from our lineage? Let's go over the evolution of man that science taught us. Humans came from a trail of Australopithecus down to Homo sapiens, but in 2008, a strange finger bone was found in the Denisova cave. This bone did not match any tests attempting to relate it to the known hierarchy of evolution. Instead, it led to more evidence from a strange civilization that history just happened to omit. What is this civilization? Is there more proof of their existence? What happened to them? We'll find out together in this new episode of Secret Origins. Welcome. It all started with something small. So small you could have mistaken it for nothing. In 2008, deep inside Siberia's Denisova cave, archaeologists pulled a tiny fragment of bone from the soil. When they unearthed this bone, they didn't expect much. Maybe a Neanderthal scrap, or perhaps a modern human. But they were so wrong. When geneticists sequenced the DNA, they froze. This wasn't Neanderthal. It wasn't Homo sapiens either. It was something else entirely. A new kind of human that no one had ever seen before. That little bone belonged to a young girl who lived about 50,000 years ago, and it was found in no other place than a cave known as the Denisovan Cave. Because of how strange this bone was, scientists realized that there could be more from where that came, so they called her kind the Denisovans. Suddenly, our neat family tree of us and the Neanderthals exploded into chaos. Why not? There was now proof that another human species had walked the earth alongside us. Not just that, there was a fat chance that they were equally sophisticated and powerful. And yet, despite the staggering evidence, there is no mention of them in our history books. If you've never heard of the Denisovans before, you're far from alone. The shocking part: more testing has proved that their DNA is everywhere. Studies propose that modern people from Tibet, Mongolia, Papua New Guinea, and Australia may carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA in their blood. That's not a minor detail. That's a full-blown lineage, an entire species that no longer exists, except inside us. And here's the kicker. While Neanderthals left dozens of skeletons, Denisovans left almost nothing. A pinky bone, a few molars, a jawbone high on the Tibetan plateau, a possible skull in China. That's it. Yet somehow they contributed massively to our genome. So how does a species powerful enough to rewire our DNA leave no trace in the dirt? Did we erase them, or did they erase themselves? In 2010, the news of the Denisovans hit the world, and with its release, it rattled anthropology to its core. Imagine scientists coming to announce that they missed a previously unknown group of hominins. For decades, the story was simple. Humans evolved in Africa, Neanderthals lived in Europe, and the two occasionally crossed paths. Clean, neat. But the Denisovans ruined that neatness. From the finger bone found in Denisovan Cave, Siberia, a new mitochondrial DNA was uncovered. Suddenly, there wasn't just one lost cousin. There was another hiding in plain sight. Even worse, this lost and found breed was just as influential. To top the news, the Denisovans were not a fringe group. They were global players. Since their DNA was found in more than one place, they most likely shaped the immune systems, bodies, and even the minds of entire populations. And yet, their fossils are almost non-existent. How could a species so important vanish so completely? It's as if they were scrubbed away from the record. That's the puzzle we're about to unravel. When scientists pieced together the Denisovan story, they noticed something strange. First, they did find a few pieces of evidence, but these were not limited to the Denisovan cave. They found more across Asia, leading us to believe that the Denisovans had a solid stand, and there are probably more remains waiting to be found. But it doesn't end there. The fossils we do have, like the Xiaohe mandible from Tibet and the massive Harbin skull from northeastern China, don't look like scraps from fragile cave dwellers. They look powerful. For example, the Harbin skull is so huge that it earned the nickname Dragon Man. It has a massive cranial cavity, heavy brow ridges, and a robust jaw. One look, and you'd see that these weren't small, delicate humans. They were built like fortresses. What about the Xiaohe jaw? They are twice as thick as a modern one, with molars so large they look like they belong to a different creature altogether. The Denisovan brain case was massive, estimated to be nearly 20% larger than the human brain case. Not just bigger in raw size, but wired in ways we don't fully understand. Could that mean Denisovans weren't just another branch of humanity, but the superior humans history forgot? Now, bigger doesn't always equal smarter, that much is true. But their DNA tells a deeper story. Within it, scientists have found unique neural development pathways. This discovery hints at brains tuned differently from ours. And what might that mean? It suggests Denisovans could process memory faster, recognize patterns more clearly, and think with a kind of efficiency we can only imagine. Picture a mind storing details like a hard drive, recalling them with near photographic accuracy. And here's where science meets myth. Across Asia, legends speak of giants with extraordinary memory and wisdom. That is, beings who guided humans and seemed to command hidden forces. Were these just campfire stories? Or are they traces of Denisovans remembered as more than human? Mainstream science fights this thought, but when you place the evidence together, the skulls, the brain volume, the genetic markers, it's hard not to wonder, did these ancient humans simply outclass us, not only in body but in mind? And if they did, why are they gone? Let's step outside the cave for a moment. Across Asia, oral traditions describe massive beings who once walked among smaller humans. In Tibet, shamans speak of sky-born ancestors who towered over ordinary men. In Mongolia, they tell stories of robust warriors who lived in mountain fortresses. Even the Bible whispers of Nephilim giants wiped out in a cataclysm. You don't think this is a mere coincidence, do you? Now let's layer in the scientific evidence found. Harbin's Dragon Man skull, the Xiaohe jaw, and the random oversized molars discovered in the cave. Add the fact that Denisovans interbred with our ancestors, leaving fragments of their DNA inside us. Suddenly, the traditional tales no longer sound so far-fetched. Have you ever been short of breath hiking a mountain? That's because at high altitudes your oxygen levels plummet. Most humans struggle beyond 10,000 feet, as our blood just can't grab enough oxygen. But did you know it's different for Tibetans? They stroll around at 14,000 feet like it's nothing. Their secret is not in breath training, it's a unique variant present in their DNA. In 2010, a group of researchers led by Rasmus Nielsen discovered something massive. They saw that Tibetans carry a mutation called EPAS1, which allows blood to process oxygen in thin air. What's shocking is that this gene didn't come from us, normal humans. It came from the Denisovans. Upon further testing on the discovered remains, the same DNA was found on the Denisovans. This means that these mysterious humans had already mastered life at extreme altitudes tens of thousands of years ago. Unbelievable. Picture it. While our ancestors hugged warm valleys, Denisovans climbed icy mountains and thrived in environments we'd normally consider unlivable. To them, Everest-like conditions were no biggie because they could thrive there. In a world where even the best of humans are still struggling to adapt to normal weather conditions, the adaptation level of the Denisovans has trumped the harshest situations. But oxygen wasn't their only superpower. Denisovans also passed down disease resistance genes that still protect us today. Studies show they carried genetic traits to fight the pathogens that plagued early human populations. Indigenous groups in Asia and Oceania inherited these shields, giving them natural resistance to illnesses others couldn't withstand. So while Homo sapiens were wiped out by waves of plagues, Denisovans walked through like it was a mild cold. Their immune system wasn't just good, it was elite. It gets more interesting. Some of these genes are even linked to enhanced responses in modern humans, making us tougher against certain diseases, but also more prone to autoimmune conditions. Sometimes, it seems almost like we inherited too much firepower. Was this just random evolution? Or does it hint at deliberate genetic refinement that started with the Denisovans? And then there's the most enticing possibility, lifespan. Genetic studies reveal Denisovan variants linked to neural resilience and slower cell degradation. In plain terms, the Denisovans may have aged more slowly than we do now. Some researchers speculate Denisovans could live longer, stay sharper, and endure physical extremes without the breakdowns that modern humans face. Combine that with their robust frames